I will continue the next explanations about politeness and address form. Politeness is a way of expressing something either in the form of greeting, a comment with kind and gentle words. For example, when someone asks a help from other. An address form is a formula generally accepted as proper or suitable for addressing an individual of a particular rank or status either orally or in writing. In other words, the definitions of an address is a written or verbal statement or the physical locations of something. An example of an address is the president's inaugural speech. 123 Main Street, New York, NY 10030 is an example of an address. Okay, next slide. This is the first examples of politeness. Israeli passengers and driver on an intercity bus. Passenger, turn the light on please. Driver, what? Passengers, turn the light on please. Driver, it disturbs me. Passengers, I want to read. This exchange between two Israelis seems very direct and blunt to most English speakers. Being polite is a complicated business in any language. It is difficult to learn because it involves understanding not just the language, but also the social and cultural values of the community. We often don't appreciate just how complicated it is, because we tend to think of politeness mainly as a matter of saying please and thank you in the right places. In fact, it involves a great deal more than superficial politeness routines that parents explicitly teach their children, as the discussions of directives and expressive above suggested. Take the word please for example. Children are told to say please when they are making requests as a way of expressing themselves politely, but adults use please far less than one might suppose, and when they do, it often has the effect of making a directive sound less polite and more peremptory. Compare the pairs of utterance in examples 2, for instance, as follows. As you can see, the conversations. As always, a great deal depends on intonations and tone of voice, but clearly please doesn't necessarily increase the politeness of these directives. This raises the bigger questions of what exactly is politeness. Generally speaking, politeness involves contributing to social harmony and avoiding social conflict. More especially, linguistic politeness involves discourse strategies or linguistic devices which are perceived or evaluated by others as having been used to maintain harmonious relations and avoid causing trouble. In many cases, being polite involves adapting sensitively to involve a social relationship, as illustrated in examples 13. Okay, next slide. You can see the conversations between nurse and Mr. Druns, and you can read by yourself. The nurse begins the interactions with a polite greeting using the patient's title plus full name. He responds using the friendly form dear as an address form. The nurse continues politely, signaling her intentions and checking that he is agreeable. Mr. Grant then uses humor and an even more informal address from Sweetie. In response, the nurse shifts to a more casual style, also using humor and a casual dress form made in this interchange. Then we see two participants actively negotiating a comfortable way of relating to each other. Being linguistical polite involves speaking to people appropriately in the light of their relationship to you. Inappropriate linguistic choice may be considered rude. Using an imperative such as stop talking or shut that door to a superior at work is likely to earn the office junior requirement. Calling the managing director Sally when you do not know her well and have only just started work as a store assistant in the department is likely to be considered impolite. Making decisions about what it is and is not considered polite in any community. A practice therefore involves assessing social relationship along the dimensions of social distance or solidarity and relative power or status. We need to understand the social values of a community in order to speak politely. Okay, next slide. There are two types of politeness, positive and negative. Positive politeness is solidarity oriented. It emphasizes shared attitudes and values. When the boss suggests the subordinate should use first name to her, this is the positive politeness move, expressing solidarity and minimizing status differences. A shift to a more informal style using slang and the man as an example, Erin or swear words as in exercise 5. And while negative politeness involves expressing oneself appropriately uh, in terms of social distance and respecting the status difference, using title plus last name to your superiors and to older people that you don't know well are further examples of the expressions of negative politeness. Being polite may also invoke the dimensions of formality. In a formal situations, the appropriate way of talking to your brother will depend on your roles in the context. If he is acting as the judge in a law court, then calling him Tom will be considered disrespectful, while at the dinner table calling him young Hunter will be perceived as inappropriate or humorous. Figure 11.1 is a useful summary of the kinds of factors which were considered relevant in accounting for people's choice of appropriate address term in British English in 1970s. Okay, next, here's the structure diagrams. The model accounts for the form used as address terms in an utterance attracting tensions. Hey, address terms or in an utterance such as I'm sure you will find it interesting address terms. The diagram assumes the speakers how the addressee named and the first box takes account of whether the addressee is a child or an adult, where the line between adult and child is drawn differ between communities and even within communities for different purposes. For example, babysitting, buying firework, marrying, owning a fireman, voting. If the address would be classified as a child in the relevant social interactions, then following the minutes exit from the box, the flow chart indicates FN is used in British English. For example, hey, Jillbox 2. Label market settings refers to formal settings such as a parliament and law courts where people act in role and where speech is governed by relatively explicitly discourse rules. Form of address are derived from identity of the context. For example, young honor. Okay, next slide. We can cause offense by treating someone from their perspective too familiarly, as in A, or by treating them too distantly, as in B. Being polite means getting the linguistic expressions of social distance right as far as your address is concerned. This is very variable from one speech community to another. In North England, many newspaper vendors, bus conductors, and people selling railway tickets call everyone love regardless of how well they know them, and often regardless of their gender. By contrast, mutual TLN, Mr. Landy and Mr. Duncan, is usual between upper working class neighbors who live close to each other but who are not friends and do not see each other socially. In North America, it is usual to use first name to people you work with regardless of how little or much you like them. In other English speakers culture, mutual FN is experienced as too familiar. Mutual TLN is appropriate until you have worked together for a period of time or develop a friendship. Issues like how long do you have to know someone or how close a friendship does it have to be to use FN raise further complications. Of course, the answer will be different for different communities. Okay, the last slide is this conversation starts in a sociable manner with a friendly greeting from friends, but deteriorates as June indicates they are not coming to the barbecue without providing a convincing or detailed excuse. French complain that this will upset their planning, elicits a rather unsympathetic response from June to bad. France then indicates that she is offended with her sarcastic comment, "Thanks for letting us know." And June abruptly ends the conversations without the standard closing telephone sequence of "okay" from each participant. So, while these conversations begin politely, it doesn't end so. Interpreting politeness as well as impoliteness involves sensitively to continually changing social relationship. In example 5, the participants use language in ways intend to convey dissatisfaction sometimes. However, people unintentionally offend others as a result of different norms and expectations about how to express friendliness or respect. Through the relevant dimensions, solidarity and status may be universal. The way in which they are realized tend to differ in different communities. People from culturally different speech communities often express particular speech acts differently and use different roles of interactions as a result. Misunderstandings may arise and they may unwittingly offend one another. Okay, I think that's all for my explanation. I'm so sorry if my explanation is too fast because I need to make it faster because my storage is doesn't enough for taking the video. Yeah, I'm so sorry for all mistake. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.